In the heart of Manhattan, there is a place where time slows down, nature thrives, and the echoes of the city's past blend seamlessly with contemporary art. Welcome to the High Life, a magical escape from the hustle and bustle below. This extraordinary park, built on an abandoned railway line, offers a unique perspective of New York City, a place where rich history meets artistic expression, creating an experience unlike any other. Today, as you wander through its winding pathways surrounded by lush greenery, you will discover not just a park, but a living testament to the rich tapestry of New York's past, present, and future. In mid 1850s, New York City authorized the construction of railroads on today's 10th and 11th Avenue on Manhattan's west side. This is the very beginning of where we see railroad coming into that section of the city. As you can imagine, trains running on busy Manhattan streets was not particularly safe. The city realized it pretty quickly, and for the safety of the railroad workers and the pedestrians and other form of traffic, they hired cowboys over there, believe it or not. They would run in front of the trains, and they were known as the West Side Cowboys. So they would basically just run and will just warn anybody that, hey, a train is coming, move on. But this was inherently still very unsafe. By 1910, a study says that more than 500 people had lost their life in the hand of those trains. So the public outcry on the safety of this particular district was rising pretty rapidly from early 1900s. After in the year 1929, New York City decided to create the West Side Improvement Project. This is going to be a 13-mile or 21-kilometer elevated railroad, which is going to increase the safety of these trains, and it's going to eliminate 105 street level railway crossings. The first train on the High Line Viaduct, which was called back then, which was part of the New York Central's West Side Line, ran along on this structure in the year 1933. The elevated structure was dedicated to the city in the year 1934 on June 29th, and the first part of this West Side Improvement Project was completed. This is the beginning of High Line as we know it today. The elevated nature of the railroad actually serves a dual purpose. This part of the town was known as the meatpacking district. There used to be a lot of slaughterhouses and butchers over here, along with a bunch of other industries, starting from the Nabisco factory, as well as there's a whole bunch of smaller industries like cigar making to transportation related businesses, and so on and so forth. The railroad was made to pass directly through the buildings. What it allowed to do is all these businesses, they did not have to load and unload on the trains on the street. That's how they used to do it before. But now, because the train passes right through the buildings, they don't have to disrupt the daily flow of life, and rather from right inside the building they can load and unload their goods. So this was a huge win-win back in the day. But good times don't last forever. From the 60s, the emergence of the trucking industry meant a downfall for the railroads, and that directly translated to gradual reduction of traffic coming to this section of Manhattan. By late 1970s, there were only about 2 to 3 carloads of trains coming in per week. Finally, in the year 1980, the viaduct was shut down for good. Well, here's a bit of information no one needed to know, but I found it quirky, so I thought of sharing. The last train which came into Manhattan had three coaches and it only carried frozen turkey in them. We go back to the year 1993 in Paris, France. In the 12th district of Paris, something called Coule Verte René Dumont opened up, which I have been told is French for planted walkway. This was a 4.7-kilometer long elevated linear park built on top of an obsolete railway infrastructure. And it's this park in Paris which sparked the inspiration to create the High Line in New York. The location of this abandoned train line was very promising. This was right in between the financial district of Wall Street on the south and the hustle and bustle of Midtown Manhattan with its Times Square, Macy's, and Empire State Building to its north. This part of the town was pretty rough actually back in like 1980s. This is the meatpacking district. This is where you used to have all the slaughterhouses and butchers and just a lot of blue collar jobs. So this was not a very desirable neighborhood back in the day. A group of people saw that as an opportunity. Given how it is sandwiched between two very desirable locations and all the abandoned projects and all the piece of land which is up for grab, they saw an opportunity to transform this neighborhood. They created an organization called the Friends of the High Line. Since its formation in the year 1999, Friends of the High Line was able to gather support from a lot of celebrity New Yorkers. And after a lot of lobbying, they were finally able to convince the then Mayor Michael Bloomberg of this new concept, who announced the Highland Park in the year 2003. The construction finally began in the year 2006, and the first section of the park opened up in 2009. One of the most fun things I like to do, and even as a child, I used to love to do, was walking on a train line. If you are that person, this is heaven for you. The folks at the Friend of the Highland organization have done an incredible job in preserving a lot of those old train lines in their original form. In many sections of the High Line, you can walk on them. You can see a lot of those old junctions. Either those are raised on top of those steel bars or those are just embedded right on the street. And in many cases, you can even see some of the old signals, and in some cases, even some of the old railings, which have been preserved meticulously on the side of the train line. If you take a stroll on the High Line, and if you're a nature lover, one of the very first things which is going to mesmerize you is the flowers and the plants and trees, which are just all over High Line. Especially if you get to visit during spring or summer or during fall when these plants are in full bloom and you can see the flowers everywhere. It's just a sight to behold. For me, one of the most fascinating thing is this part of the town in the middle of Manhattan, in the middle of all this tall buildings and traffic and subway. There's now more than 200 species of insects and butterflies, and in some cases, even birds of prey, who is calling this highline its home. The organization behind Highline, they even run a program called Adopt an Insect, where you can donate and you can get more closely associated with one of those insects. The other interesting fact which I learned is during the winter times when all the trees they are they are dead and they are wilted in the ground. Normally in most places in this part of the country they will just uproot the trees, they are just going to prune the trees, but not here. This is where, if you come in the winter, you are going to see all the plants in all their glory. They may be either dormant or they may have died, but they will be there like that in the winter because those are still the abode and the home of those butterflies and of those insects. Pierre Rudolph, who designed the gardens, made this beautiful comment that my biggest inspiration is nature. I do not want to copy it, but to recreate the emotions. Another key identity of Highline has become its arts and especially sculptures. The organization over the last decade or so have commissioned a lot of very unique modern arts and sculptures to be installed here. In this particular piece, for example, is called the secondary forest, and it consists of aluminum casts of animal, human, and plant forms, and it encourages one to consider their impact on and relationship to the cycle of life. Now, I am not, an art or sculpture connoisseur or much of an expert in that matter, but in this particular case, when you're walking by and these very unique pieces are sort of spread across the whole High Line, this is definitely thought-provoking and intriguing, and you stand there even if to take a photo or just to wonder, hey, what is the artist trying to convey in this particular case? I recently came across this art form which is called What If They Bark? This is very whimsical. This is a bunch of fishes out on the land and with a missile. The fish on the very right side is holding a missile, but others are holding a guitar. I don't know exactly what it means, but it's definitely makes you stop and think. At the end of the day, this is a walkway. This is where you want to move away from the hustle and bustle of the city and you need a little bit of peace and quiet. And this does that job in a marvelous way. This is not only a beautiful, a very well maintained pathway, but this is where you get to get yourself immersed in this history of this 150-year-old rail line. You get to see this nature so up close and personal. You get to see in this space those arts and sculpture intermixed in this nature, and then you get to see the beauty and the grandeur of New York City sprawling all across you. This is a walk. I find it to be one of the most special places to explore and enjoy and immerse yourself in anywhere in New York City. The section of the High Line where we are going to end our journey today is this new, upcoming, hot, chic district called the Hudson Yards. This is where you are going to also find the vessel, which is probably the most uh, photographed object in New York, at least in the last few years. This is only fitting that a place like Highline, with all its sculptures, with all its artistic eccentricity, has vessel at one end of it. Highline was inspired up to a degree by the Parisians. But today, the success of the Highline and the transformation effect which it has on Manhattan, at least this section of Manhattan over the last decade, is inspiring many other cities to follow its footsteps. Philadelphia is considering to trying to transform its rail park. Atlanta, the Beltline. Chicago, the Bloomingdale Trail. What was started by the Parisians were improved by the New Yorkers, and today the Highlands transformation offers valuable lessons for cities around the world. It showcases the potential to repurpose forgotten spaces into vibrant public areas. So, next time you visit the Highline, take a moment to appreciate its rich history. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one.